Restoration in Cave Springs. Learn more right after this.
My college offers classes that meet my educational and career goals.
With opportunities outside the classroom.
Where the faculty know me by name.
My college can prepare me for my career.
I can earn an associate's degree and transfer credits toward my bachelor's.
My college is a state college within the university system of Georgia.
My college is affordable.
It's close to home.
My college has online opportunities.
It's where excellence begins.
We are
GHC, Georgia Highlands College.
Welcome to Community Watch. Greg.
Doc.
Hey. How are you?
Better?
Good.
Yes.
Good. It's been a little chilly though.
It has been a little chilly, and just, moving past the whole holiday season, you kind of take a slow down somewhat, so I'm ready to get moving again.
Well, good. We're going to help you get moving today because we have a return guest, but one of our best guests, Mike Burton.
Knowledgeable guest.
About
so
everything.
Many things. I know when you talk, Mike, when you talk about Mike Burton, it's just, to me, it's just like talking to that Uncle Remus type figure, somebody that has a story, knows a lot of different things, and you could just listen to him talk.
And a certain percentage of what he tells you is true.
It's true, yeah. So,
So it's fine. But I know in particular, who knows what we'll cover today,
Yeah.
but I know in particular we're going to talk about a Cherokee cabin project that Mike's been working on for a couple of years now. So there's some stories around that, and I know people will be interested in hearing him talk about it.
Didn't know that, so yeah.
So we will be joined by Mike Burton right after this break. Do not go away.
If you're looking for a new pet that your family will cherish every day, consider adopting from a shelter. Shelters are the best places to find a new pet. That's where you'll discover healthy, loyal, and loving animals, eager to become a part of your family. A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet, so bring home your new buddy today. To find out more, visit theshelterpetproject.org.
Welcome back to Community Watch. We are very happy to have with us today Mike Burton. Welcome back to the show. It's been a little while.
It's been a good while. It's been several years.
Has it?
Yeah.
Well, you've been
last time
occupied.
I was here, I was clean shaven, You can see how long it's been.
You let it go over the weekend, apparently.
Well, exactly. If y'all weren't going to have me back on the show, I'd just grow it out.
Yeah, just let it go.
Well, you've been busy. We've been here, but I know you've been busy. And I know that this cabin project has taken up a lot of your time the last couple of years now. So, I know a lot of people in the county are familiar, aware of it, but some may not be. And I know that, what little I know about it is that it was a cabin that another structure had been built around, so that it was kind of hidden. So tell us a little bit about the story about this cabin and how it, I don't know if discovered is the right word, or rediscovered, or.
Yeah, well, let me just say that 2 years ago this month I assumed the presidency of the Cave Spring Historical Society. Some people call it the Hysterical Society. And I thought, why would you do that? Well, the boards they had there over the last umpteen years have been very discordant. They couldn't agree on anything. And so they said, Mike Burton can do anything. You can come in and manage this board. So, okay, that's a challenge. So I accepted that challenge, got elected president. And back in 2010, there was a building called the Green Hotel. Now, it's called the Green Hotel, but it was blue.
Okay.
See, this is one of the things you have to understand. Mr. Green, who'd been dead for 100 years, apparently had something to do with the hotel. But anyway, another man had had a store there for 25, 30 years, a nursery, and had some apartments in it, and basically had let it deteriorate tremendously. And when he retired, he set out to sell it. And a real estate developer came in and says, well, I'll buy that. And so he paid a good price for it, but it's on the corner of Broad Street and Love Street, the two main streets in Cedartown, so it was a good location, right downtown. He paid a good price for it. And lo and behold, a few months later, when he had some guys out there getting ready to demolish it, some boards fell off. Well, now here comes different people from town who noticed these boards, these lap boards, laying on the ground. Well, there'd been a rumor as long as I've been in Cave Springs, since '66, that somewhere in that town there was a historic log cabin. Well, there the logs are. You can see them. Pull a few more boards off. There they are, hand-hewed logs. Well, the Cave Spring Historical Society says, we can't let him demolish this. So he said, fine, you can buy it. And guess what? The man, after a few weeks, doubled his money. Now we have got a $150,000 mortgage on a building that is rotting down. And you go and you look at the building, and the roof's been leaking for 10, 15, 20 years. Anybody knows anything about old buildings. It's in a floodplain, and it was only about 8 inches off the ground. So all the seals had rotted. For people who don't know what a seal is, that's the main beam that holds everything up. And in the old days, they were great big beams, 8 by 10, 8 by 12, 10 by 12. These things had rotted. So the building is shifting all kind of ways. Windows are broke out. It's just in terrible shape. But the Historical Society owns it, and they own the cabin that they think is in it, but nobody knows for sure. So they start raising some money, taking money that they've had, paying on the mortgage, and they start hiring preservation experts from Atlanta, Chattanooga. Greg, these people are not cheap.
No.
$5,000, they'll come in and tell you that this is an old building and it's falling down. And they'll write you a 10-page report and you give them the money. Well, that's rocking on. So finally they get a archaeologist out of Tennessee to come down here and ask him to date it. Well, first of all, they asked some people from West Georgia to come up and date it by doing a little dendrology work, by cutting core samples out of the wood and running it through a spectrograph and looking at how many rings and so forth and how much carbon is in there and seeing how old it is. Well, they said that failed, right? That failed because the wood was too soggy. So that didn't work. Well, this guy, he comes in, and meantime, I bring a bunch of Boy Scouts down with Steve Kroll, who does archaeology on the side, and we do some digs and find some artifacts. Well, the archaeologist, he comes down, digs a couple holes, doesn't find anything, charges us $5,000, and then we give him some of these artifacts we found, and he says, oh, this right here dates this building at 1810.
Oh, wow.
So he writes a very nice professional report, 1810. All right. So who owns this? Who built this building? Well, that's the whole story. We could do 2 or 3 episodes on that. The Cherokee Nation, as we all know, owned all this part of Georgia up until the middle 1830s. And the only way you could do business in the Cherokee Nation was to either be a citizen born there, or if you were smart, you'd find you a good-looking Cherokee woman and marry her. Now you are a full-fledged citizen automatically. Just compare that to our times. You're now a citizen. You can do whatever you want to do. Interestingly enough, the Cherokees were a matriarchy, so the lineage for rulers went through the women, not through the men, and even ownership of property. So that got real tricky. But the Van family, a bunch of Scotchmen, came over here around before the American Revolution and were marrying Cherokee women. And old Chief Joe Van, they called him Rich Joe Van because at one time he was considered the richest man in the United States around the time of the American Revolution. Well, he married these Indians and put claims to thousands of acres. He had 127 slaves working cotton fields, peach orchards. He owned all the toll roads, bridges. He owned everything that made money. And so Chief Joe got pretty rich. Well, he had kids, and those kids had kids, and they had cousins, and they intermarried. And so, to make a long story short, the Van that was in Cave Spring was named Avery Van. And of course, he had several brothers, and they all got together sometime around this 1810 period, and there were a lot of traveling salesmen coming into to this area, to the Cherokee Nation. Pots and pans, guns, blankets, whatever. So, and the Cherokee Indians were trying to become more European, and so they were buying these things. Very interesting. So they decided to set up the Holiday Inn of the Cherokee Nation. Now, we do not have documentation. Some of the oral history says they actually hired a group of people from Europe, either from Switzerland or Sweden, who built this style of log cabin that was hewed and had the notches in it. And they built 5 of these cabins, 20 miles apart. Now, why 20 miles apart, you ask?
I would have asked that.
You would have asked that, wouldn't you, John? That's because if you ride a horse on the roads they had then, which were pig trails, right, it would take you all day to go 20 miles. So if I make a sale to Greg over here in the morning in whatever little town, Calhoun, and now I want to make a sale in Cave Spring tomorrow, I can ride 20 miles from Calhoun to Cave Spring, and I'll have a nice place to eat a meal, get something to drink, spend the night, get up the next day, make my sale, then I can ride on to Lafayette the next day. So they built 5 of these inns, taverns, about 20 miles apart. And they were very successful, very successful.
So that's what this cabin was.
It is an
original.
18 by 24 foot, 2-story hewed log cabin that was built by Avery Van, who was half Cherokee and his full-blooded Cherokee wife. And they used this as an inn for a period of time. Another period of time, they may have lived in it. There's, again, the documentation is very spotty. We have it put down as 1810, which we like that date. It makes it the oldest building in Floyd County, one of the oldest buildings in northwest Georgia. I mean, right in there. Now, just a little aside here, I got checking in my family history and found out there's a house down in Richmond County in Lincoln that my granddaddy grew up in. It was built in 1817. And it was like your old style Southern mansion, 2 stories, columns, all that, boards, built in 1817. Well, a lot of the controversy we've been in is people don't understand the difference between being in Savannah, for instance, and how technology moves over time, over space and time. So technology in 1800 was one thing in Savannah, but it was something totally different up here. So, you know, a lot of people have to grasp that. For instance, this building.
Hold on to that thought, because we're going to have to take a break. Stay with us. We've got more coming. Don't go away.
Packers. Viking. Packers. Viking. Packers.
Viking. Red state. Blue state. Vegan.
Carnivore.
We come from different places.
Uptown. Downtown.
Optimist.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full.
But when we live united, we create real, lasting change in the building blocks of life. The education, income, and health of our communities,
Live.
our families,
United.
even the person next to us.
Live united.
Real change won't happen without you. So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up at liveunited.org.
Welcome back to Community Watch. Our guest today is Mike Burton, and I was going to say we're having a conversation, but really we're listening.
Mike has a story, I told you now.
You asked me.
Yeah, no, that's good.
You asked me. No.
And we had to cut you off at the break, and I apologize for that. But I'm curious, so maybe you can get to this in part 2 of the story. I'm curious about why someone would build another building around this cabin, because it was hidden by this other building around it for a period of time.
200 years.
So why would?
Well, it appears that success, right? The Cherokee Nation was growing by leaps and bounds during that period of time. Now, we have documentation where at this same period of time, there was some controversy with white settlers coming in and stealing horses, for instance. And then when the Indians would try to catch them, they'd end up in a gun battle. And of course, if the Indian killed a white settler, then he was carried to court and hung. But if the settler killed the Indian, it wasn't a big deal. So that type of thing was going on. At one point, the American cavalry had chased the Cherokees from up north somewhere, either around Calhoun, Lafayette, in that area, all the way to the Coosa River. There was a pretty good battle around 1807 at the Coosa River between the cavalry and the Cherokee. The Cherokee got across the river and held off the army for a certain period of time. Finally, they were able to flank them and get behind them. The Indians retreated to Cave Spring. So this area, by the way, Cave Spring at that time was called Beaver Pond, because where the spring came out and the creek was, the beaver were damming up, and that was a very, very swampy area up until 1938, when the WPA came in and hired farmers to take shovels and wheelbarrows and dig the Cave Spring pool and turn that swamp into the biggest swimming pool in the state of Georgia. So, you know, all this history ties together. But, yeah, so there's just tons of history in this area right here, and how the Cherokee relate to the American government, how business was going. Avery actually had a ferry over at Coosa, and I used to spend a lot of time on the Coosa River years ago, and the foundation, these big rock foundations for where they would put the cables in for the ferry boats, was still there back in the 1970s. I don't know if they're still there or not with all the stuff that Georgia Power's done, but right there. So he owned that ferry. Well, it gets more interesting. Oh, Avery Vann, being a clever man, when the American government decided they wanted the Creek Indians gone, right? Gone. So they sent the Creek Indians, the men, down to Florida to fight the Seminoles, where the Seminoles would kill the men. In the meantime, we gave the families blankets that had smallpox to kill the women and children. And the men that survived came back were pissed off. So they were not happy. So they got into a little fight, and Andrew Jackson started chasing the Creeks, and he gets them over here at Horseshoe Bend, Alabama. Gets them into the bend. The Indians push him into the bend of the river. It's a big bend like this, several acres. Well, there'd been a little tornado come through and the trees were down, made a natural fortification. So Andrew and his little force of men was here. The creeks were slowly decimating them. And Avery Van gets a bunch of Cherokees together and they ride it from here over there, sneak around behind the creeks and attack them. And then the creeks are sandwiched in. So in effect, Avery Van saves Jackson's life, our president's life right there. And a lot of stuff was going on then. A lot of stuff was going on. At that same time, there were a group of Mennonite missionaries at Coosa. And the Georgia government sent the militia up here. There was a law against proselytizing Indians. Sounds pretty bad, don't it?
It does.
Yeah, proselytize. So they took these guys and they chained them together and tied a rope to horses and took them to Savannah, where they had to be drugged to Savannah to go to court. So this type of stuff that was going on, it was just constant turmoil. But the place was growing. Back to John's question. The place was growing. Everything about there is no written documentation. Everything is more or less speculation and common sense. But I have a lot of experience in these type of buildings, and my friends do, and we go in, and what we call the addition to the cabin is, the cabin is hand-hewed logs. So you take a log that's maybe this big in diameter and you cut it down to 4 or 5 inches, and then you put notches on each end. This was hand-hewed beams that are then mortise and tenon. Now, I know your viewers know what mortise and tenon is. That's where you cut a notch in this big beam going this way, and then you cut a tendon, and it sticks into that notch, then you drill a hole through it, and you put a peg in it. There are no nails. This period of time, a nail would cost you probably a month's wages. You didn't go out and drive a bunch of nails. Now, I got a nail gun now. I'm not crazy too bad, but some of the guys that work for me, they'll put 100 nails where 4 would do. You know, just insane. Just insane.
Don't need that many, huh?
They didn't have any nails. They made their hinges out of leather because they didn't have any metal to make hinges, you know. Everything then was, that cabin, when we dismantled it, had not a single nail in it. All the door frames and window frames were pegged, like I said a while ago. They would take the logs, put them all together, take something up there to hold them in place, then they would cut them out with a 2-man saw, and then they'd put your boards up here, drill a hole through that board into the log and put a peg in. Now, when we put it back together, we simulated that. Our pegs have big old bolts in there, but we put a peg on so it looks like it's a real peg, because we had to deal with a building inspector. We couldn't do this. But what's interesting, I took down one old building that was built in this period of time, and I'd have like a porch rafter, would be 12 feet long, and it would be sitting on top of another beam where it had been mortise and tenon and pegged. And I figured when I pulled the beam out from under that porch rafter, it's going to fall, right? No, it didn't fall 1/8 of an inch. Been sitting there 200 years. Well, I get up there and try to knock that peg out. I can't knock it out. You know why? You know why, John?
I have no idea.
Because they took the pegs and made them first and let them dry out of oak. Then they took the beams and cut them out of pine while they were green. They put them together. They put that dry peg in there, and then that green wood would shrink down till it became one. Isn't that interesting? I mean, that's some interesting technology.
That's some technology.
So there were only 4 pegs holding that whole cabin together. And they were on the 2nd floor at the top corners where it held the rafters to the cabin walls, the 4 corners. There were 4 pegs, 4 wooden pegs. That's all.
Now this because we're getting short on time, but this cabin, can you visit it today, or y'all still putting it back together, or is what state is it in?
We had our grand opening on October the 1st. We're having people go down there. We have a meeting coming up in 2 weeks in which there are a lot of discussion. We have a new board's been elected. I don't know, we'll elect officers in 2 weeks. I don't know who the president's going to be, but I got a sneaking suspicion. And what we're going to do, Greg, there's a lot of controversy in this thing, and that would be a very entertaining story. There are a lot of people opposed to everything that I did. But we now have 3 historical buildings in the park, actually 4. We have this log cabin. We have the old caboose. We have the old Presbyterian Church. All this is under the auspices of the Cave Spring Historical Society. One of the controversies was I felt like I was in good, safe grounds because our bylaws said the purpose of the organization is to preserve, educate, and promote tourism. So Cave Spring is a tourist town, boys and girls. We have 4 restaurants for a town of 1,000 people, and they have an hour wait. Now, I just can't figure that out.
I've been to one of them, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, I've been to 2 of them.
2 of them. You gotta wait,
Yeah.
because they're so popular. We have not really focused on the education and tourism. We are going to, it has been proposed that we create an educational center that will be a part museum, part art gallery. When I started this project, I told them I would make kiosks so that when a school kid or an elder hostel person came in, we've already had 6, 7 elder hostel buses come down. We've had several school buses come down. We haven't promoted it. We have not promoted it, but we will. On our new board, we have a marketing person. So things are going to change. Our new board is going to be the most compatible board we've had in forever. And we're going to really focus on these 3 things. Right? We've done the preservation. But we will have kiosks, so you can go in there and how do you hand Hugh a log? Poop, you hit a button, there'll be a video. Well, who was the Savior Band? Poop, you hit a button and there'll be a reenactment of him talking. Well, who's his wife? Poop, we'll have a reenactment of his wife. Okay, how were the hinges made for the later buildings? Boop, here's a blacksmith showing you how to make these. So we want it to be educational. We want it to be educational, and we want this thing to be open, but we have to go through a few more steps to make it open. We have volunteers already who are willing to go down there and be docents and take people through and explain things, but we want to get this center open, which will have hopefully an Indian museum in it, a settlers museum, a museum for the deaf, and a museum for the African American, the E.S. Brown situation. We're still negotiating on all that, but it should be something that would be central.
We have to take another break, so take a breath. We will be right back. Do not go away.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds.
Welcome back to Community Watch. We've been listening to Mike Burton tell stories about Cave Spring and more. You know, I just got to think the people that, if you get to the kiosk period of your plan, are going to miss out on having you there physically to tell the story. But we're going to have you back, Mike, to tell us more. So hope you can.
All right.
And thank you.
There's
all.
a lot more.
I'm sure there is. Thank you all for being with us. We'll see you next time on Community Watch.
Greg, you hit